In a small, quiet diner tucked away on the outskirts of Chicago, life moved at its own unhurried pace. The air was filled with the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon, mingling with the soft hum of conversations from regular patrons. It wasn't anything fancy, just a cozy spot where locals gathered to enjoy hearty meals and escape the worries of their day-to-day lives. For Emma Carter, this little diner had become her second home over the past few years. At 25 years old, Emma carried more responsibilities than most people twice her age. Her days were spent juggling shifts as a waitress while trying to keep up with her dreams of becoming a nurse. Nights were reserved for studying textbooks under dim lighting in her cramped apartment. Life hadn't been kind to her lately. After losing her mother to illness, she found herself shouldering not only emotional grief but also mounting medical bills. Still, Emma approached each new challenge with quiet determination, refusing to let hardship break her spirit. On one particularly dreary afternoon, rain pattered against the diner's windows, casting a gloomy shadow over the room. Despite the weather, business remained steady, keeping Emma busy weaving between tables with plates balanced precariously in her hands. She greeted customers warmly, flashing her signature smile, a genuine curve of her lips that could light up even the darkest corners of someone's mood. It was during one of these trips back to the counter that she noticed him. A tall, impeccably dressed man walking through the door, holding open the entrance for a wheelchair-bound teenager trailing behind him. The man stood out immediately, not because he wore an expensive suit or carried himself with an air of authority, though those traits certainly caught attention, but because of the stark contrast between his polished appearance and the worn-down interior of the diner. His sharp features hinted at a life accustomed to making tough decisions, yet there was something softer in his eyes, almost like sadness lurking beneath the surface. Beside him sat the boy in the wheelchair, perhaps around 14 or 15 years old, with thin arms resting limply on the armrests. His face bore no expression, but his body language suggested discomfort, maybe even frustration. Emma hesitated for a moment before approaching them. "Welcome," she said cheerfully, forcing herself to sound upbeat despite the heaviness in the atmosphere. "Can I get you seated?" The man nodded curtly, pushing the wheelchair toward a corner booth near the window. As they settled in, Emma grabbed 2 menus and placed them gently on the table. "I'll give you a minute to look over the options," she added, offering another reassuring smile before stepping away. She couldn't help but glance back occasionally as she worked, curiosity tugging at her thoughts. There was something about the pair, an unspoken story written in their body language that intrigued her. The man seemed protective yet distant, carefully arranging napkins and utensils within reach of the boy without saying much. The boy, on the other hand, stared blankly ahead, occasionally twitching his fingers as if attempting to grasp something invisible. When Emma finally returned to take their order, the man introduced himself simply as Jonathan. He spoke clearly but briefly, ordering a grilled chicken sandwich for himself and a plate of scrambled eggs for the boy, whom he referred to as Daniel. "He doesn't eat solid foods very well," Jonathan explained, his voice tinged with both apology and resignation. "Soft things are easier for him." Emma nodded understandingly, jotting down the request in her notepad. "No problem at all," she replied softly. "I'll make sure everything is prepared just right." With that, she hurried off to relay the order to the kitchen, stealing one last glance at Daniel. Something about the boy's vulnerability struck a chord deep within her heart. She'd seen plenty of struggles in her own life, but seeing a parent navigate such challenges alongside their child painted a picture of love and sacrifice that resonated deeply. A short while later, Emma returned, carrying 2 steaming plates. She set the food down carefully, ensuring Daniel's dish was positioned close enough for easy access. Jonathan thanked her politely, then began feeding his son with deliberate precision. Each bite was offered slowly, waiting patiently for Daniel to swallow before presenting the next morsel. Watching the interaction unfold, Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. Parenting was hard enough under normal circumstances, but here was a father navigating obstacles far beyond what most people could imagine. Then suddenly disaster struck. Midway through the meal, Daniel began choking, his frail body jerking slightly as panic flickered across Jonathan's face. Without thinking, twice Emma sprang into action. Years of working in the diner had taught her how to handle emergencies calmly, and instinct took over. Rushing to the table, she knelt beside Daniel, placing a firm hand on his chest to stabilize him. "It's okay," she murmured soothingly, her tone steady despite the tension in the air. Using quick, practiced movements, she guided the boy into a safer position until the obstruction cleared. For a brief moment, silence enveloped the table. Jonathan looked at Emma, his eyes wide with gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you," he whispered hoarsely, his voice cracking under the weight of emotion. I don't know what I would have done if you weren't here." Emma shrugged modestly, brushing off the praise. "Just doing my job," she replied, though her racing heartbeat betrayed her calm exterior. Helping others came naturally to her, it always had. But this situation felt different. There was a rawness to it, a glimpse into a world where every small act of kindness carried monumental significance. As the rest of the meal progressed, Emma stayed nearby, periodically checking on Daniel to ensure he was comfortable. She offered gentle suggestions to Jonathan, sharing tips she'd picked up over the years about feeding techniques that might work better for someone with limited mobility. To her surprise, Jonathan listened intently, absorbing every word with earnest appreciation. By the time they finished eating, the initial stiffness between them had softened, replaced by a tentative sense of camaraderie. Before leaving, Jonathan handed Emma a generous tip, far exceeding what was expected. But it wasn't the money that left the deepest impression. It was the way he looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "You're remarkable," he said quietly, his words lingering in the air long after he and Daniel had departed. That evening, as Emma cleaned up the diner and prepared to clock out, she replayed the events of the day in her mind. What started as an ordinary shift had turned into something extraordinary, a reminder that even the smallest gestures could ripple outward, touching lives in ways she might never fully understand. Little did she know, this chance encounter was merely the beginning of a journey that would change everything, for her, for Jonathan, and for Daniel. In the days following that fateful afternoon at the diner, Jonathan Hartley found himself thinking about Emma more often than he cared to admit. There was something about her. Her calm demeanor during Daniel's choking episode, her genuine warmth, and the effortless way she handled difficult situations that lingered in his mind. It wasn't just her actions, it was the kindness behind them. For someone who had spent years navigating a world where people either feared or flattered him because of his wealth, Emma stood out like a beacon of authenticity. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan made it a point to visit the diner regularly, always bringing Daniel along. At first, he told himself it was purely practical, to ensure his son continued receiving nutritious meals in a safe environment. But deep down, he knew there was more to it. He wanted to observe Emma further, to understand what made her tick. Each time they came, he watched how she interacted with customers from all walks of life, cracking jokes with truck drivers, offering comforting words to elderly patrons, and even teasing rowdy teenagers until they laughed despite themselves. Her ability to connect with people seemed almost magical, and Jonathan couldn't help but marvel at it. Emma, for her part, noticed Jonathan's frequent visits too. Initially, she assumed he simply liked the food or enjoyed the quiet ambiance of the diner. But as their interactions grew longer and more personal, she began picking up on subtle details about him. Beneath his polished exterior, there was a weariness, a heaviness that hinted at struggles beyond the obvious challenges of raising a disabled child. Once, while refilling his coffee cup, she overheard him quietly apologizing to Daniel for being late to pick him up from therapy. Another time, she caught sight of him scrolling through emails on his phone, his brow furrowed with stress. These glimpses into his private world intrigued her, sparking a curiosity she hadn't expected. Their conversation started small, but gradually expanded beyond pleasantries. During one visit, Jonathan asked Emma about her plans after work. She hesitated before answering, unsure why a billionaire would care about her ambitions. "I'm studying to be a nurse," she admitted shyly. "It's tough balancing school and this job, but I really want to help people." Jonathan nodded thoughtfully, his expression softening. "That's admirable," he said, his tone sincere. "Not many people have the patience or compassion required for that kind of work." Encouraged by his interest, Emma opened up a little more. Over subsequent visits, she shared snippets of her life, how she'd taken care of her younger brother since their mother passed away, how she worked double shifts to cover tuition fees, and how she dreamed of one day opening her own clinic for underserved communities. Jonathan listened intently, asking questions that showed he genuinely cared. In turn, he revealed fragments of his own story. The long hours he'd poured into building his company, the sacrifices he'd made for Daniel's medical treatments, and the loneliness that came with living in a world where everyone wanted something from him. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, they discovered common ground in their shared experiences of loss and resilience. For Emma, talking to Jonathan felt cathartic, like unburdening herself to an old friend rather than a stranger. And for Jonathan, these exchanges offered a rare sense of connection, one he hadn't realized he'd been missing until now. One particularly slow evening at the diner, when most patrons had already left, Jonathan lingered at his usual booth. Emma approached cautiously, sensing that something was weighing on him. "Everything okay?" she asked gently, setting down a fresh pot of coffee. He sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "Just thinking," he replied after a pause, "about how much Daniel has changed my life. Before him, I thought success meant money and power. Now I realize those things don't matter if you're not there for the people who need you." Emma tilted her head, considering his words. "Sounds like you've learned a lot from him," she said softly. "I have," Jonathan agreed, his gaze drifting toward Daniel, who sat quietly beside him. "But sometimes, I wonder if I'm doing enough. If I'm giving him the life he deserves." Emma placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, surprising even herself with the gesture. "You're doing your best," she said firmly, "and that counts for something. Trust me, I know what it's like to feel like you're never doing enough. But showing up every day, being there for him, that's everything." Her words hung in the air, simple yet profound. Jonathan looked at her, gratitude shining in his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt understood, not judged, not pitied, but truly seen. As the weeks turned into months, their bond deepened. Jonathan began treating the diner not just as a place to eat, but as a sanctuary where he could momentarily escape the pressures of his high-powered life. He marveled at how effortlessly Emma commanded respect from everyone around her, from the gruff cooks in the kitchen to the surliest of customers. She had a way of making people feel valued no matter who they were or where they came from. Watching her navigate the chaos of the diner with grace and humor inspired him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Emma, too, found herself looking forward to Jonathan's visits. They became a highlight of her otherwise exhausting routine, offering moments of levity and reflection amidst the grind. Through their conversations, she gained insights into a world vastly different from her own, a world of boardrooms, investments, and philanthropy. Yet, despite their differences, she saw glimpse points. The day the letter arrived, Emma felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. It was unlike anything she had ever received before, a crisp envelope bearing the Hartley Enterprises logo, delivered to her modest apartment by a courier who seemed almost too formal for the setting. Her heart raced as she turned it over in her hands, wondering what could possibly be inside. When she finally opened it, her eyes widened at the neatly typed invitation to meet Jonathan Hartley at his downtown office the following afternoon. Emma read the note several times, trying to make sense of it. What did he want? Why would someone like him summon her to such an important place? The questions swirled in her mind, making sleep elusive that night. She tossed and turned, imagining scenarios ranging from bizarre job offers to awkward misunderstandings. By morning, however, she decided there was only one way to find out. Go see him. Dressed in her best outfit, a simple blouse and slacks borrowed from a friend, Emma stepped into the gleaming skyscraper that housed Hartley Enterprises. The lobby, alone, was enough to intimidate her, with its polished marble floors and towering glass walls. A receptionist greeted her warmly and escorted her to an elevator that whisked her up to the top floor. As the doors slid open, Emma found herself standing in a luxurious suite filled with modern furniture and breathtaking views of the city skyline. And there, waiting for her near the window, was Jonathan. He looked different here, less approachable than he did in the diner. His suit was immaculate, his posture commanding, yet when he saw her, his expression softened. "Emma," he said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." She shook his hand nervously, unsure how to respond. Of course, I was curious about this meeting." Jonathan gestured for her to sit across from him at a sleek conference table. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Jonathan leaned forward, his gaze steady. "I'll get straight to the point," he began. "I'd like to offer you a position as Daniel's full-time caregiver." Emma blinked, taken aback. "Full-time?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Jonathan confirmed. "You've already shown incredible skill and compassion in caring for him during our visits to the diner. I believe you could provide the kind of support he needs, not just physically but emotionally as well." Her mind raced. Working directly for Jonathan would mean leaving the diner behind, giving up the stability of her current job. But it also meant spending more time with Daniel, building on the progress they'd already started together. Still, the idea felt overwhelming. "That's a big responsibility," she managed to say. "And what about my studies? Nursing. School takes up so much of my time." Jonathan nodded, clearly expecting this concern. "Which is why I'm offering to cover your tuition," he explained. "Not just partially, but fully. You wouldn't have to worry about finances while pursuing your degree. All I ask is that you prioritize Daniel's care alongside your education." Emma stared at him, stunned. Tuition coverage? That was a dream she hadn't dared let herself entertain. Between working long hours and scraping together whatever funds she could, the financial burden of nursing school had weighed heavily on her shoulders. This offer wasn't just generous, it was life-changing. Yet, doubts crept in. Accepting such a proposal felt monumental, almost surreal. Was she ready for this level of commitment? Could she handle stepping into the world of someone as wealthy and influential as Jonathan? Sensing her hesitation, Jonathan added softly, "I know it's a lot to consider. Take your time to think it over. But please understand, I wouldn't be making this offer if I didn't believe you were the right person for this role." His sincerity struck a chord within her. Over the months, she'd come to admire Jonathan, not because of his wealth, but because of his dedication to Daniel. She'd seen the sacrifices he made, the love he poured into ensuring his son's happiness and well-being. If she could ease some of that burden, even in a small way, wasn't it worth it? That evening, after returning home, Emma sat at her kitchen table staring at the letter again. Her brother Alex watched her curiously from across the room. "What's going on?" he asked, noticing the troubled look on her face. She hesitated before explaining everything. The offer, the tuition support, the weight of the decision ahead. Alex listened intently, his brow furrowing in thought. "It sounds like an amazing opportunity," he said finally. "But are you worried about something else? Like, I don't know, people thinking you're taking advantage of him?" Emma sighed, nodding slowly. "Exactly. People might assume I'm doing this for the money or the perks. And honestly, part of me feels guilty accepting so much from someone I barely know." Alex reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand over hers. "You're not doing this for yourself, Em. You're doing it for Daniel, and maybe even for Jonathan. Think about how much you've already helped them. This isn't charity, it's trust. He's trusting you to take care of his son, and that's huge." His words resonated deeply, Emma spent the rest of the night weighing the pros and cons, imagining what life might look like if she accepted the offer. She pictured mornings spent helping Daniel with physical therapy exercises, afternoons balancing coursework, and evenings sharing quiet moments with Jonathan as they discussed their day. It wouldn't be easy, nothing worthwhile ever was, but it felt meaningful. The next morning, Emma called Jonathan and agreed to accept the position. Relief washed over his face when she told him, followed quickly by gratitude. "You won't regret this," he promised. "Neither will Daniel." True to his word, Jonathan wasted no time setting things in motion. Within days, Emma moved into a cozy guest house adjacent to his sprawling estate, a compromise that allowed her to maintain her independence while being close enough to assist Daniel whenever needed. The house was modest compared to Jonathan's mansion, but still far nicer than anything Emma had lived in before. There was a small garden out back where she imagined planting flowers someday, and a desk perfect for studying late into the night. Her new routine took some adjustment. Mornings began early, with Emma assisting Daniel through stretches designed to improve his mobility. They worked together patiently, celebrating tiny victories like holding a pencil or managing a spoonful of yogurt without spilling it. Afternoons were reserved for classes, which Jonathan arranged to align with Daniel's schedule. Evenings often ended with the three of them gathered in the living room, watching movies or playing games adapted for Daniel's abilities. Through it all, Emma marveled at how seamlessly she fit into their lives. Jonathan treated her like family, consulting her on decisions big and small, from hiring additional therapists to planning outings tailored to Daniel's interests. In return, Emma brought a warmth and vibrancy to their household that had been missing for years. She introduced traditions like Friday pizza nights and Sunday picnics in the park, encouraging Jonathan to step outside his comfort zone and embrace moments of joy. As weeks turned into months, Emma realized she wasn't just changing Daniel's life or Jonathan's. This opportunity was transforming hers too. With her tuition covered, she threw herself into her studies with renewed focus, excelling in courses that once seemed impossibly challenging. Knowing she had Jonathan's unwavering support gave her the confidence to push beyond self-doubt, to dream bigger than she ever had before. Yet amidst all the progress, challenges remained. Some days were harder than others, particularly when Daniel struggled with tasks he'd previously mastered or when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm Emma. On those occasions, Jonathan reminded her of the importance of balance, urging her to take breaks and prioritize her own well-being. Slowly but surely, they built a partnership rooted in mutual respect and understanding, a foundation strong enough to weather any storm. Looking back, Emma knew she'd made the right choice. What started as a chance encounter in a diner had blossomed into something extraordinary, a second chance at life not just for Daniel and Jonathan, but for herself as well. Working as Daniel's full-time caregiver brought Emma closer to the Hartley family than she ever imagined possible. Every day was a blend of challenges and triumphs, each moment shaping not only Daniel's life, but also hers and Jonathan's. Over time, their roles evolved beyond employer and employee. They became a team united by love, trust, and shared purpose. At first, Emma worried about overstepping boundaries. She reminded herself daily that she was there for Daniel's benefit, not to interfere in Jonathan's personal decisions. Yet, it didn't take long for her presence to weave itself into the fabric of their lives. Mornings began with cheerful greetings as Emma arrived at the main house, ready to dive into Daniel's therapy routine. They worked together tirelessly, Emma guiding him through exercises designed to strengthen his muscles, encouraging him when frustration bubbled to the surface, and celebrating every small victory like it was monumental. One particularly memorable morning, Daniel managed to pick up a spoon using adaptive utensils, a feat that had seemed impossible just months earlier. His eyes lit up with pride, and Emma clapped enthusiastically, cheering him on. Jonathan stood nearby, watching silently, his own face breaking into a rare smile. "You did it, buddy," he said softly, kneeling beside his son. The three of them shared a quiet moment of joy, one that felt almost sacred in its simplicity. These moments weren't isolated incidents. With Emma's guidance, Daniel continued to make steady progress, defying expectations set by doctors who once doubted his potential. Simple tasks like brushing his teeth or feeding himself became milestones worth celebrating. For Jonathan, witnessing these achievements filled him with a sense of hope he hadn't felt in years. He often joked that Emma possessed some kind of magic touch, though deep down he knew it wasn't magic. It was patience, dedication, and an unwavering belief in Daniel's abilities. As Daniel flourished under Emma's care, so too did Jonathan. Spending more time around Emma forced him out of his comfort zone, challenging him to reconnect with parts of himself he'd long neglected. Before meeting her, Jonathan's world revolved around work and caring for Daniel, leaving little room for anything else. Now, however, he found himself engaging in conversations about topics outside business strategies and medical treatments. Emma introduced him to books she loved, movies that inspired her, and even encouraged him to try new hobbies like painting and gardening. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Jonathan confided in Emma about his fears, regrets, and dreams in ways he never had with anyone else. He spoke openly about the loneliness that came with wealth, how friendships often felt transactional, and how losing Daniel's mother had left a void no amount of success could fill. In turn, Emma shared stories about her own struggles, her mother's passing, the sacrifices she made for her brother, and the guilt she sometimes carried for wanting more out of life despite everything she already gave. Through these exchanges, Jonathan rediscovered what it meant to truly connect with another person. For Emma, listening to Jonathan's vulnerabilities humanized him in ways she hadn't anticipated. Beneath the polished exterior of a billionaire lay a man burdened by responsibility, yet yearning for connection. Their mutual openness created a foundation of trust that transcended their differences, transforming their relationship into something deeper and more meaningful. Of course, life wasn't without its complications. As news of Emma's involvement with the Hartleys spread, whispers began circulating among staff and acquaintances. Some admired her dedication, while others questioned her motives, speculating that she must have ulterior reasons for accepting such a generous offer. Rumors reached Jonathan, who dismissed them outright, defending Emma fiercely whenever someone dared insinuate otherwise. But Emma couldn't ignore the gossip entirely. One evening, after overhearing snide comments from a neighbor during a grocery run, she returned home visibly upset. Jonathan noticed immediately. "What happened?" he asked, concern etched across his face. She hesitated before answering, reluctant to burden him with negativity. "It's nothing," she said finally. "Just people talking." Jonathan frowned, piecing together what she meant. "About us?" She nodded, avoiding his gaze. "They think I'm using you. Or worse, that I'm trying to get something out of this arrangement." Jonathan sighed, pulling out a chair for her to sit. "Let me tell you something," he began firmly. "People will always have opinions, especially when it comes to someone like me. But none of that matters unless it comes from the heart. And I know yours does. You've given us more than anyone else ever has, your time, your energy, your compassion. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." His words brought tears to her eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. "Thank you," she whispered. "I guess I needed to hear that." Despite the challenges, Emma refused to let negativity overshadow the good they were accomplishing. Instead, she focused on the positive impact she was making, not just for Daniel but for Jonathan as well. Together, they formed a partnership that went beyond caregiving. They supported each other through difficult days, celebrated victories big and small, and learned to navigate life's complexities side by side. One of the most significant changes occurred when Emma suggested starting a support group for families raising children with disabilities. Inspired by her experiences with Daniel, she envisioned creating a space where parents could share resources, advice, and encouragement. Jonathan embraced the idea wholeheartedly, offering to fund the initiative and provide access to his network of contacts. Within months, the group gained traction, drawing participants from across the city and sparking conversations about accessibility and inclusivity. Watching Emma take charge of such a project filled Jonathan with immense pride. He saw her not just as a caregiver but as a leader, someone capable of inspiring change and bringing people together. Her passion ignited a similar spark within him, prompting him to reevaluate his priorities. Slowly but surely, he shifted his focus from corporate ventures to philanthropic endeavors, dedicating more time to causes close to his heart. For Emma, seeing Jonathan embrace advocacy work reignited her own dreams of becoming a nurse. With tuition, fully covered and flexible hours allowing her to balance studies with caregiving, she excelled in her coursework, earning top marks and glowing recommendations from professors. Knowing that Jonathan believed in her abilities gave her the confidence to push past self-doubt and aim higher than ever before. Evenings at the Hartley estate became cherished rituals. After dinner, the trio would gather in the living room, sharing laughter and conversation as they played board games adapted for Daniel's needs. Sometimes Jonathan would play the piano while Emma sang softly, her voice filling the room with warmth. On weekends, they ventured out into the community, attending events tailored to accommodate Daniel's requirements. These outings allowed Emma and Jonathan to experience life outside their bubble, connecting with others who shared similar journeys. Through it all, their bond deepened. Jonathan no longer saw Emma merely as an employee or caregiver. She had become part of their family, a yaoi sister figure to Daniel and a trusted confidant to him. Similarly, Emma viewed Jonathan not as a distant billionaire but as a friend, a father doing his best to give his son the happiest life possible. Looking back, neither of them could have predicted how profoundly their lives would intertwine. What started as a professional arrangement blossomed into a partnership rooted in love, respect, and shared purpose. Together, they proved that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or possessions, but in relationships, resilience, and the ability to make a difference in the world. Years passed, and the lives of Emma, Jonathan, and Daniel transformed in ways none of them could have anticipated. Each day brought new challenges, but also victories that reminded them how far they had come. For Emma, this journey wasn't just about fulfilling a caregiver's role, it was about becoming part of something bigger than herself. And for Jonathan, it was about rediscovering purpose beyond wealth and power. Emma graduated top of her class from nursing school, earning accolades, not only for her academic achievements but also for her tireless dedication to improving healthcare accessibility. Her thesis on adaptive care techniques for individuals with disabilities caught the attention of medical professionals nationwide, sparking invitations to speak at conferences and seminars. But even amidst the whirlwind of recognition, Emma remained grounded, crediting much of her success to the lessons she learned while caring for Daniel. On the evening of her graduation, Jonathan threw a small celebration at his estate. The guest list included close friends, family members, and a few colleagues who had supported Emma along the way. As she walked into the beautifully decorated backyard wearing her cap and gown, applause erupted around her. Tears welled up in her eyes as she scanned the crowd, seeing familiar faces smiling back at her, including Daniel, seated proudly beside his father. Jonathan stepped forward, holding a microphone lightly in one hand. "I've known many extraordinary people in my life," he began, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "But none compare to Emma Carter. She didn't just change our lives. She inspired us to dream bigger, work harder, and believe in possibilities we once thought impossible." The room fell silent as Jonathan continued, recounting moments of triumph. How Emma helped Daniel take his first independent steps with a walker, how she advocated tirelessly for inclusive policies within local schools, and how she encouraged him, Jonathan, to step out of his comfort zone and embrace vulnerability. By the time he finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. When it was Emma's turn to address the gathering, she took a deep breath, gripping the microphone tightly. "I never imagined I'd be standing here today," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "When I started working at that diner years ago, I was just trying to survive, to keep my brother fed and pay the bills. But then I met two remarkable people who changed everything." She glanced over at Jonathan and Daniel, her smile softening. "They taught me what true strength looks like, not in muscles or bank accounts, but in love, patience, and resilience. Her words resonated deeply with everyone present, especially Jonathan, who nodded silently, overcome with gratitude. That night marked a turning point for Emma. Not the end of her journey, but the beginning of a new chapter where she could use her skills and experiences to help others facing similar struggles. Inspired by her success, Emma decided to launch a foundation dedicated to supporting families raising children with disabilities. With Jonathan's backing, both financially and emotionally, the foundation quickly gained momentum. They partnered with hospitals, schools, and community organizations to provide resources ranging from adaptive equipment to counseling services. One of their flagship programs focused on training caregivers using methods Emma had developed through her work with Daniel. It became so popular that requests poured in from cities across the country. Seeing the foundation thrive gave Jonathan a renewed sense of purpose. After decades spent building Hartley Enterprises, he chose to step down from active leadership, passing the reins to trusted executives while focusing his energy on philanthropy. Together, he and Emma traveled extensively, speaking at events and meeting families whose stories mirrored their own. Their advocacy efforts earned widespread praise, shining a spotlight on issues often overlooked by society. For Daniel, progress continued steadily under Emma's guidance. He achieved milestones doctors once deemed unattainable, communicating through assistive devices, participating in adapted sports leagues, and even joining a local art class where he discovered a passion for painting. Watching him thrive filled Jonathan with immense pride, reminding him daily of the incredible impact Emma had made on their lives. One crisp autumn afternoon, Emma stood beside Jonathan at a fundraising gala hosted by their foundation. The Grandie ballroom buzzed with excitement as attendees mingled beneath glittering chandeliers. Photographs of smiling children adorned the walls, each image telling a story of hope and perseverance. At the center of the stage stood a large screen displaying a video montage of testimonials from families helped by the foundation. As they looked out at the sea of faces gathered to celebrate their achievements, Jonathan turned to Emma with a thoughtful expression. "We've come a long way since that diner," he remarked softly, his tone tinged with nostalgia. Emma chuckled, nodding in agreement. "Who would have thought a plate of scrambled eggs could lead to all this?" she joked, gesturing toward the bustling crowd. Jonathan smiled, shaking his head. "It wasn't the eggs," he said earnestly. "It was you. Your kindness, your determination, your belief in Daniel when no one else did, including me." His words struck a chord deep within her heart. While Emma always credited the Hartleys for changing her life, she realized now how profoundly she had impacted theirs as well. Their bond transcended roles and titles. They were family in every sense of the word. Later that evening, during his speech, Jonathan announced plans to expand the foundation internationally, ensuring that its mission reached even more communities worldwide. As he spoke, Emma watched Daniel sitting nearby, clapping enthusiastically despite his limited mobility. His joy radiated outward, touching everyone fortunate enough to witness it. That night, after the event concluded, Emma found herself reflecting on the past few years. From struggling waitress to celebrated advocate, her transformation felt almost surreal. Yet she knew none of it would have been possible without taking a leap of faith. That fateful decision to accept Jonathan's offer and step into a world vastly different from her own. As she gazed up at the stars dotting the night sky, Emma felt a profound sense of peace. Life hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Every challenge, every sacrifice had led her to this moment, a place where she could make a difference not only for herself, but for countless others sharing similar journeys. In the distance, laughter echoed from the Hartley estate, carried by the cool breeze. It was a sound full of warmth and promise, a reminder that love, resilience, and human connection could overcome any obstacle. For Emma, Jonathan, and Daniel, their shared story was proof that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, transforming lives forever. And so, as the years stretched ahead, they moved forward together, not as employer and employee, nor as benefactor and beneficiary, but as equals bound by trust, purpose, and an unshakable belief in the power of compassion.